I'm going to give you some information about your right to demonstrate and some like tips and tricks for how to be successful if you're participating in public protest. We'll start with just some basic information. So it is your right to demonstrate in public spaces. And this is everything I say in this presentation is going to be true everywhere you go in the country. I practice in New York City. And so I might have some specific information about New York City that I share throughout, but all of this would be applicable to anywhere in the United States. So you do have the right to demonstrate in public spaces. And what I mean by that is the sidewalk, a public park, out in basically anywhere in New York City that isn't inside the subway, which even there are some rules inside the subway that would allow you to demonstrate there. You can pretty much just walk outside your door and protest. You could grab some friends and go out. You have the right to march or stand or picket on any sidewalk. The only limitation to that is that you can't block the entire sidewalk. So as long as there's room for people to walk by without forcing them to go into the street, you're good. You don't need any kind of permit or permission for that. And that's good news because our permitting system, which does exist for larger like parades and bigger gatherings, is pretty much broken since COVID. There's pretty much no permits going out. But a parade permit would be something like if you wanted to shut down Fifth Avenue and do the Pride Parade and you need to shut it to traffic, those would require a permitting process with the city. But in general, nearly every demonstration that you would participate in is not going to be a permitted demonstration. What spaces are public this is sort of less vital in New York City because so much of our space is public, but particularly if you are in the suburbs, there might be certain spaces that feel very public but aren't actually public. So things like parking lots of like a supermarket, for example, is probably not a public space, and there might be additional rules there. So that's just something to keep in mind. But basically, get out there, walk around, stand outside City Hall. That is your right. Two things I'm just going to say here on this first slide that are things that most people don't know. If you're going to a demonstration, make sure that if you're carrying a sign, it either does not have like a stick or a pole attached to it, so you're holding it with your hands, or whatever it is attached to is like a soft, like a cardboard tube. For example, shipping tubes are a really good way to do this. And I just say that because here in New York City and really everywhere that I know of, police are actually going to stop you if you have a sign that's on a rigid support. So if you have a sign that's being held up on like a 2x4 or even like a yardstick, they're probably going to stop you and ask you to remove it because they will believe that could be used as a weapon. We're going to get more into like their definitions of weapons in a little bit, but that's just a very basic thing to know. If you're carrying a sign, it's best just to carry it. And then the second thing, this is a specific New York City rule that almost nobody knows about, but it actually is illegal to write on sidewalks in New York City with chalk. That is against the law. We have a city ordinance, and as you might imagine, it is enforced almost entirely on the basis of how the officer feels at the moment. It's incredibly discriminatory. It's enforced against just a couple weeks ago, there was a 50-something-year-old Black woman who was chalking on the Upper West Side, and she was like arrested for that. But lots of other people, artists or kids or anybody, even businesses, would sometimes chalk and nothing happens to them. So we know that this is enforced in a totally arbitrary way. So it's best to know before you go out that if you're planning on writing slogans or anything out with chalk, you actually can be stopped for that by the police. Okay, so this is just a list of like things that you want to leave at home when you're protesting. So drugs, it might be obvious, but maybe it's not. In New York City, marijuana is decriminalized, and in many other places around the country, it's actually legalized. But I would say in a protest situation, it's really best to leave that at home because your chance of having a police encounter is at least marginally higher in a protest than it is in your day-to-day life. So let's just leave home anything that could potentially escalate that situation or make things more complicated. The second one, again, maybe obvious, weapons, leave your weapons at home. I put "and weapons" in quotes here. And the reason is because when you're thinking about what you're carrying into a protest, you really want to put yourself into the mind of a police officer. They are going to be very creative when they decide what they want to charge you with. If they want to come after you, like they have a million tools in their toolbox to come after you. And what they decide is a weapon could be something you never thought was a weapon. So for example, I have had a client who was arrested for carrying a keychain that his school gave him as an award for like perfect attendance, a teenager, and the police decided that that was a weapon. Over the summer, there was a lot of coverage of the police saying that a tire repair kit was a weapon. They can basically find anything on you and decide it's a weapon. So the next category is tools. That's obviously still connected here to the same sort of categorically connected. If you carry tools for work or for whatever, just maybe leave them home. And then spray paint is another one. They're going to interpret your carrying of spray paint however they want, and it may make your life more difficult. So best to just leave that at home. These next categories, these next four things, I put them in a different color because these are really like a use your discretion thing. Valuables, if you get arrested at a protest, if you did get arrested, the police will take everything from you. They're going to take jewelry, they're going to take money, they're going to take your phone, anything you have. If one of those things is something that you cannot live without, it's best not to bring it with you, because the truth of the matter is you don't always get those things back. They may be taken by the police when you are taken in and you never see them again. So if it's your grandmother's locket or, you know, your watch that you've had your whole life, maybe just leave those things at home, because there's not a 0% chance that you will never see them again if you were to get arrested. Large backpacks and purses, the police are going to be more apt to search larger bags. So the smaller, the better. You're also less likely to forget that there's something in there. Condoms, this one is a little bit unique to New York, but in New York, prosecutors are permitted to use evidence that a person was carrying more than 3 condoms as evidence of prostitution or soliciting charges. It's a very quirky and extremely problematic area of New York law that we've been trying to change for a long time. But it does happen. People do get charged. If you got picked up at a protest, maybe it has anything to do with condoms or soliciting prostitution. But if you had condoms in your backpack or in your pocket, they could potentially turn that over as evidence to a DA. So best to leave them at home if you can. And then bikes is another one. You might need to ride your bike to a protest. We're not going to tell anyone not to do that. But we do see bikes getting impounded quite a lot, particularly over this past summer in New York City. The police were aggressively taking bikes from people. So you may want to park your bike farther away than you normally would, and just keep it out of the area in order to protect your bike from getting impounded. Okay, so we're going to talk about privacy protections. So let me give you just a tiny bit of background. Primarily, I'm going to be talking about electronic privacy on this slide. And what you need to know is that the police are using all kinds of techniques. This is very well documented, particularly with the NYPD, but it's really happening all over the country to see what's on your cell phone. And some of those techniques include using a device called a stingray, which you may have heard of. A stingray is literally a piece of equipment that goes inside the trunk of a police car and mimics the signal of a cell phone tower. So your phone thinks that it is communicating with the nearest AT&T tower, but it's actually communicating with this fake tower in an NYPD cruiser and transmitting all of that information to them. So a stingray doesn't give them access to the content of your messages, but it does tell them who you're sending messages to and when and where you are when you send them. So that's not to scare you or flip you out, but more just to let you know that most people don't have a really good sense of how far the police are going to spy on people right now. And I think it's easy to like brush it off and be like, well, that would never happen to me, but it actually is happening all the time. So I'm going to give you some tips for how to protect your privacy. And what I mean by that is primarily your cell phone privacy. So the first thing is to keep up to date. Update your iOS, update your operating system, update all of your apps. If you just keep putting that off and you're like later, those often contain security patches that are really important, and that if you don't update, they can be exploited by the police to get information that you don't want them to have. The second tip is to lock your phone with a code, and we recommend a 6 or 9-digit code. Don't use your fingerprint. So I have a little fingerprint icon here as a reminder, but don't use your fingerprint. Now, why is that? So if you are picked up by the police, you have the Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. You've probably all heard that phrase. I have the right to remain silent. The right to remain silent means you never have to tell anyone your code. But you don't have the right to not have your finger like smushed down on your phone. Or as we saw this summer, we actually saw a police officer pull a guy's mask off and then hold his phone up to his face to try to unlock it using his facial recognition lock. That video is on YouTube if you want to look it up. That happened in Queens. That you don't have a right for that to not happen to you. You don't have a right for them to not hold your phone up to your face or force your fingers down on the phone. So use a code, because you never, ever, ever have to give away your code. And if you hate using a code, just use it when you're at a protest and then go back to the facial recognition later if you want. The next thing is to use encrypted message platforms. I'm not going to talk a lot about this. You can Google this, but basically you want to use a platform when you're sending text messages, particularly if you're engaged in any kind of civil disobedience. You just want to make sure that those messages are encrypted. And so you want to use apps like Signal, or if you're texting an iPhone to another iPhone, that is end-to-end encrypted. WhatsApp is end-to-end encrypted. So just look around online, make sure you're using encrypted message platform. Live streaming is something that there's been a lot of talk about as a way to defeat the challenge of like the cops taking your phone and then deleting everything off of it, or maybe you don't ever get your phone back. And so one way that people often try to get around that is by using Periscope or Facebook Live or Instagram Live to really show what they're seeing in real time, so it can't be deleted later. I'm going to come back to this because live streaming can also have some consequences that I think are important for you to know, but it is an option and something that you might want to think about. So the sort of other side of the coin of live streaming is that we really want to protect other people's privacy as well. Most likely when you go out into a protest situation, you're not trying to become a witness for the state. That's probably not your goal. You probably don't necessarily want to be a witness in a case. For example, if someone is arrested for civil disobedience or for vandalism or for assault on a police officer, and it so happens that you recorded that thing, the DA is going to come to you and ask you for that thing. They may even issue a subpoena for that record, for the photographs, for the video. And so one thing to keep in mind is to really just let's not film what other protesters are doing unless it's part of showing what the state is doing. We're really, as protesters, we're exercising our right to be out there. What we're really trying to do, I imagine, and what you want to do when you get out there is really to keep an eye on how the state is responding, to participate in your First Amendment activity, but not necessarily to be creating reams of evidence for a later prosecution. So just keep that in mind when you're recording things, that they could, if they could potentially contain evidence that might be used against someone. And then the final thing, which is, this is sort of extra, but if you really don't want to risk that your phone might get taken from you or confiscated, or that any of your data would be surveilled or used improperly, then we recommend that people use a burner phone. You can get these for like $99. They're pretty common. You just go to Best Buy and get a burner, and basically you can put everything you need on there, whatever apps you need for the day. And that way you have nothing to worry about, or less to worry about, I'll say. Okay, so the next thing is about physical protection. This next couple slides are really important in the current moment that we're in, because I've been doing this work for almost 13 years, and I've never seen the level of police violence against protesters as I did this summer. I've been on the streets during many major New York City demonstrations, and just the level of violence was so much bigger this year than we've seen in the past. And so it's really important that we are going into these situations in a way that is safe. So here's some tips for that. Be aware of your surroundings. By that, I mean, like, if you're walking in a group of people, and it can be really easy to just follow that path and not realize where you are, what neighborhood you're in, how you're going to get home, or maybe you're going down a dead end street or something where it might make it really easy for the police to actually do a mass arrest. Or you might be walking across a bridge and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I'm on the Brooklyn Bridge. I didn't even know that's where we were going. And now there's no way off except to keep going. Don't get into a situation like that where it's surprising to you. Just make sure that you're aware of your surroundings. And that you have a plan for how you're going to get out of the space. So if you're in, and we're going to talk about the pins later, but if you're in one of those NYPD like barricaded areas, like, let's not lose track of where the exits are, for example, in case you do have an emergency or you need to get out, or frankly, you just are over it. Make sure that you are able to protect yourself and keep yourself safe. Pay attention to traffic. These are largely unpermitted demonstrations that we've seen over this summer, which means that the NYPD did not close the street to vehicle traffic. So you could be walking with a group of people and have no really sense of what's going on around you, and all of a sudden there's cars going by. In fact, we see the police open and shut streets in like a very deliberate way to break up demonstrations. And car traffic is a real threat. They're not necessarily going to keep the cars from coming into the crowd. And so you really need to pay more attention to traffic than you think. I would pay the amount of attention to traffic that you do when you're just walking down the street. Don't lose sight of that just because you're in a group of people, because it's a real danger, and sometimes it's even purposeful. And then the last one is to have IRL and virtual partners. So have somebody in real life who's at the protest, who knows you and knows what you're doing and knows how to get a hold of you and can look out for you, and have virtual partners. So have somebody who is not on the scene, who is kind of your emergency contact in case anything does happen, or in case you end up getting arrested, that you have someone to call. I see that there's a thing in the Q&A, but I feel like if I click on that, I'm going to lose my screen sharing. So I don't know if it's best to take that question now, David, or just keep going and come back to them at the end.
Johanna, you can keep going. We're going to answer questions towards the end.
Okay, great. Okay, so pre-draft an emergency message. This is exactly what it sounds like. Just write that text so that if you are getting arrested, you just have to push one button that says, hi, I'm getting arrested. And hopefully that goes to your virtual partner who knows where you are. And then water and first aid, just carry what you can carry, what makes sense for you. Make sure that you are well equipped in case of an emergency. So this, I mentioned we were going to talk about the barriers. So these are just some examples of, in particular, I'm using NYPD visuals here, but a lot of departments around the state are using similar things to this and around the country. This orange netting is a very popular tool for them for a technique that they call kettling. Kettling is actually frowned upon by most like human rights organizations and First Amendment groups because it creates panic, because basically you think you're just in a crowd and then all of a sudden the whole crowd is wrapped in this big orange net. It's very alarming. The police use it to make mass arrests when they want to arrest everyone in the net. And it's a very alarming situation. So just so there's no real way to avoid it. You don't necessarily know where it's coming from when you're protesting. But if you did happen to see them carrying the net, you will know that's what they're doing. They're looking to then basically wrap this thing around a huge group of people and arrest everyone in the net. These barriers are static barriers, so they're not going to be showing up and just wrapping you in them like the net. But you will probably see these if you're demonstrating in New York City. The thing to keep in mind is that the NYPD is actually required to keep exits for these, so they can't use them to make a box. It can't be a closed rectangle or square. There need to be openings in the barricades. And if you notice that there aren't any we would very much recommend that you take pictures, document that, put it on Twitter, send it to us, send it to the AG's office, because that's actually a violation. It's very important that these are not used to pin people in. So I want to say a couple things about chemical weapons, not to be alarmist or to be super scary, but because it's a reality. Anytime you turned on your TV this summer, you would have seen that these are real. And so I just want to talk a little bit about how to keep yourself safe. So pepper spray is an irritant. And by that, it irritates your skin, your eyes, your mouth. It's an irritant. It is not a poison. It is, the effects can be short lasting, or they can last for, several hours, depending on how sensitive you are and how much you were sprayed. But pepper spray is the thing where the cop has it in their hand and it's a close up, targeted weapon. So they're using that against one or two or a few people, and it has to be used very close by. And in most cases, pepper spray is not going to cause any kind of long-term damage. It hurts, but is not going to, it's not going to cause long-term damage in the same way that tear gas is. So tear gas is not an irritant. Tear gas is a poison. And if you want information about tear gas, I'm just going to say that actually the best place to learn everything there is to know about tear gas is the CDC website. The CDC website has a whole section on chemical weapons, and they talk about tear gas. But what you need to know about tear gas is that it's an aerosolized powder that sticks to moisture. So I'm going to talk about this later, like what to wear and how to prepare. But if you have lotion or SPF on your skin, that's like glue to tear gas. So it's really important that you know how these things work so you can maximize your safety in the situation. Tear gas also sinks. Like I said, it's a powder, it's not a gas. So it's gonna sink. So the best way to get away from tear gas is to get as high as you can, as quickly as you can. So get out of the area. If you need to climb up some stairs or something, you can get to fresh air. And tear gas is a long range weapon. It's not up close. They're shooting it out of a canister. You've probably seen this on TV. It's not an up close weapon, and the canisters themselves are very dangerous and can cause injury. So it's really important to know basically what that is and sort of know that could happen, because it can be very hard to protect yourself in the moment from a tear gas canister, from knowing that's coming. Generally, police are going to give a warning before they fire, but not always. We know that they don't always. Okay, so this is just a list of what to wear to a protest. Most of this is going to be self-explanatory. I would say pockets instead of a backpack, for example. I would wear long pants. This time of year, this is a lot easier if you have jackets on, layers. Layers are good if you did encounter chemical weapons, because if there's tear gas on your clothes, you've got to take those clothes off or you're just going to keep inhaling it. So if you have sweater, you can just take it off. That's much, much better. In fact, the CDC recommends not even using those clothes again, or at least until you can wash them thoroughly. So layers are really important. And then eye protection. This is kind of tricky because you don't necessarily want to be wearing glasses in case there is a problem. Glass can break. If there is a projectile or something, that can be scary. But at the same time, you want to be able to see, and glasses might actually protect you in some circumstances. So I think this is really like a dealer's choice. You need to think about what is the best for you, what's going to make you feel the safest. If you think that this demonstration might result in the use of chemical weapons, we would say no makeup and no sunscreen. Mascara, moisturizer, those kinds of things are magnets for tear gas. And then contact lenses. Contacts are really problematic in a chemical weapon situation. It's like the worst thing you can have. So actually glasses are probably better than contacts if you can. So this is just a little recap of kind of like what to do when you're on the scene. I said it before, head on a swivel, know what's happening, save your battery, you're gonna need it, and it's gonna drain quickly, particularly in a really big situation where the towers are overloaded. Your phone is gonna be searching for a signal a lot, and that will zap your battery. So I would make sure to put it on low battery mode. You can reduce the brightness of your screen to save battery. Memorize a phone number. If you did get arrested, you are not going to be able to consult your phone for your emergency phone number. So have one number memorized, make that your virtual partner, make sure it's not someone who's also on the scene. That's not that helpful if they also got arrested. So someone who's not there, memorize that number. And then capture officer names and badge numbers. These are supposed to be on display. They are not always. There's very well documented that the police often cover them up, but to the extent that you can tell their name or their badge number, get a picture of it, write it down, that can be really helpful if you do need to file a complaint. So this is a very quick, this is the quickest possible know your rights presentation, which is there's basically just 3 lines you need to know. If an officer stops you, am I free to go? If the officer is looking through your purse, your backpack, your pockets, you only have 1 line, which is I do not consent to this search. And then if you are arrested, there is only one thing you ever need to say to a police officer, and that is, I want to speak to a lawyer. Don't answer any questions except for giving them your name. You're under no obligation to, and the truth is you do not know what a police officer knows when they start asking you questions. They have information that you don't know about, and they are legally allowed to lie to you, and they will lie to you if they think it will let them get more information. So they might tell you that someone else said something about you. It could be a complete lie. It doesn't matter. To the police is not the place to defend yourself and tell your side of the story. To your lawyer is that place. Definitely defend yourself and tell your story to your lawyer. After a protest, document any injuries and get treatment. Send any pictures and videos. I put the New York Attorney General here. You can always send them to the NYCLU. Obviously, if you have a lawyer, those are 3 places where if you see abuses, the AG and the NYCLU in particular are going to be looking to follow up. And you could also send to your ACLU affiliate in any state, whatever state you're in. And then I would consider deleting images and videos. And the reason is this is a callback to what I said before. You don't want to become a witness for the state. You're not trying to get subpoenaed for anything. And if you delete it, then when you get the subpoena, the answer is I don't have those videos anymore. And then file complaints. This is for the Civilian Complaint Review Board in New York City. In other places, they have also civilian review boards or police review boards. File complaints of abuses you saw or abuses you experienced. This is the email address to get involved with the NYCLU's protest monitoring program, protest@nyclu.org. We are actually doing a training tonight. If you want to be a protest monitor with us, Ria in her presentation actually spoke about legal monitors and protest monitors. That is our version of that program. There are a lot of other ones, but if you want to get involved, feel free to send an email to protest@nyclu.org, and we'd love to have you.